So,
So where are we?
hang on, real quick, we'll do this. So joining us
Okay.
this week, we've got Steven Stamp Lax. You write for Indoor Lacrosse, and you have been a general box lacrosse commentator for years. Your wealth of knowledge never ceases to amaze me with how well you know where these guys played in juniors and everything. For those people new to the channel, actually, would you mind giving us a quick little where they can find you and the easiest way to find all your info?
Yeah, you can hit me up on Twitter or X at Stamplax. Instagram, I'm Stamplax1234. Didn't really know what I was doing when Instagram started, and just grabbed a really silly handle. Yeah, and go to Inside Lacrosse, IL Indoor in particular, ilindoor.com. I'm the editor and produce the majority of the content. We got some other great writers with us, but yeah, I produce a ton of content on IL Indoor. And yeah, that's where to follow me. And then you can catch me doing games a lot of places. I've done NLL, I've done multiple world championships in box. I've done a world field championships. I do KUFLA, the Canadian Universal Field League. I've done senior B, senior A. I've done, called a whole bunch of man cups. I've called Minto Cups, Founders Cups, President's Cup, a whole bunch of things. And
Well, that's
I
actually how
love,
I know you as a play-by-play commentator because I
yeah,
got to meet you for our first real big, when we went and the first time we had commentators. Uh,
yeah,
it was a very steep learning curve off the start. You were the first guy that said, "No, we need headsets," and honestly, it was one of the best things we've ever done because with the
yeah,
headsets, the sound is just so much better. But yeah, that's how I
yeah,
knew you as a play-by-play guy, and now getting to know you, I
yeah,
was like, "Oh, you right? Yeah, all this other stuff.
yeah,
It's been
yeah.
awesome."
Yeah, and so it's a lot of fun. I love doing games with you. It's been great. Our first thing was the Lax night, right? Back at the Odd in Utica. Was the first time, right? We worked together.
Yeah, that was the first time we'd worked together, and you were
Yeah,
I remember Scott Nee said, he goes, "You need headsets," and then when we got there and you explained, you're like, "I watched the game like this." I was like, "Oh, that makes perfect sense. Why you need a
yeah,
headset because you're standing
yeah,
there watching the game. You can't hold the mic." Yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I love it.
Well, yeah. I think what my point was, if you have a handheld mic, you're going to be turning. You're going to be going further and closer to the mic, and it's going to be very inconsistent sound. You need the headset. You need the microphone right there, so you can set it at the distance from your face that's going to work to make the sound as consistent as possible for the viewers. Because it's awful when you're trying to watch a game and the sound's going up and down and up and down. That's no good. Or
Yeah,
the announcers are talking over each other because they can't hear each other or whatever. So yeah, you want to have that. So here's another case. Patrick Kastchuk just peels out. We see that. And then the next play that's shown here, this is Zach Young running the ball up the floor, well, jogging the ball up the floor, and he hands it off. And he starts to peel off to the bench. And as he's turning to the bench, just before the restraining line, he sees how much space he's got. And he turns and comes in. I call it the Priolo because I saw Steve Priolo a few years ago start doing this. Such great effect. Priolo would literally run in and do a little circle and head over to the bench and then circle back in to get a pass or whatever. Or if he was carrying the ball, he'd circle like he was going to pass it off. And this is a kid in his first season who's not known as a transition player. He's a real D first guy, and he just makes a great play to toss this ball off. Gets a nice loose ball, gives it up. That's what he is used to doing, giving the ball up. He hands it to Mike Byrne, and then sees the space, comes back, and gets a pretty good shot. Doesn't score, so it doesn't turn up in the highlight reels, but it's a great play by Zach Young. And this is part of why the coaching staff has been so happy with him. And, they took him a few picks after Nicholas Volkov because I think they were more confident in Volkov. Volkov's a great athlete. And they saw, the upside with Volkov is so obvious. And Young's a real D first, stay at home kind of guy. He's not a flashy player. And you need to see a lot of him to really get a feel for how good he can be. And they've said, like Glenn Clark and the staff have said, hey, we knew he was good, but we had no idea he'd be this good this quickly. And to me, most of what he does good is in the defensive end, but this play shows the poise that is, as we said, a big part of why Albany has been successful and why Zach Young is proving to already be a key player in this team.
yeah. And Clarky said at the press conference that one of the big things with the guys that they've picked though, and they really were going after that effect for the poise, and with so many young guys at the same time, everybody's getting playing time all over the place. So Young gets a regular rotation. He's not only seeing one or two shifts a game. I mean, how often do you? I'm relatively new to box lacrosse. How often do you get a complete turnaround or a flip it like you do here very often? Does this happen a lot in the NLL, or is this?
No, no, it does not. Um, I think Albany was kind of preparing for this. They knew, I mean, they knew they had Simmons and Kurtz coming this year. They were hoping they'd have Trevor Johansson as well, um, which would have been fantastic. Um, but they knew the two righties were coming. That was going to make a big difference. That's why they could afford to let Connor Kelly go, because Simmons was obviously coming in and taking a big role. I believe they knew the Longboat was going to be ready to go, and they had seen how good he was before he got hurt. He ripped it up in the Arena League, so they knew a lot of the things that were coming. They also obviously have Dyson Williams coming next year. They saw the growth of Ethan Walker. I mean, so much good stuff was happening. I think they knew they'd be better. But I mean, I've talked to Glenn Clark about this a fair bit, and he's under no illusions. He's not saying they're a contender for a championship, being 5-0. He's like, I'll be happy when we have 10 wins, because that's probably what gets you into the playoffs, right? Like, that's where what they're thinking about. They're not thinking, yeah, we've won 5 games. They're thinking, hey, this is great. We've won 5 games. We need to keep winning, and we need to keep getting better, because people know they're coming. So, but it is not normal for a team to turn around this quickly. I mean, Buffalo was down near the bottom of the league, getting high draft. They got a first overall pick a handful of years ago that, they used to turn into Josh Byrne, and he's been huge for them in what was a great draft. I mean, that was Byrne, Withers, and Zach Courier were the top 3 picks. Hard to go wrong there. But Byrne's been huge for them. And they turned around pretty quickly. But I mean, to go from 3-13 to being 5-0, it's you can look back just one year and see Rochester that came out with the 6 or 7 wins to start the season. And they had been doing a similar thing where they've been growing. So it does happen. But I mean, this looks pretty sustainable. I don't mean they're not winning 18 games. I don't think they're going to win 15 games this year. I think, everything's been going well. They've been making all the big plays towards the end, but I would be stunned at this point if they don't make the playoffs. I said in my season preview that I thought they'd at least double the 3 games they won last year and maybe triple it, and I feel pretty good about that right now, that they're going to make a big stride.
Yeah, I would say it's hopefully. I mean, as a Firewolves fan, it's a safe bet that we could get the double, which will be the sixth win. But
Mhm.
yeah, you talk about. It'll be interesting to see how the teams adjust, because this is a fairly new team. They not a lot of film on
Mhm.
these guys as a group, so that is,
Yeah.
you're expecting essentially, they're not going to sweep the year, but I'm more curious to see how they handle the ups and downs. But I mean, after the Rush game
Mhm.
last week and then the game this week, taking Halifax with all the experience, I'm very
Yeah.
optimistic in how it's been.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of any particular team. I'm a fan of the game and of players playing well and teams growing, and seeing what people do and how teams develop. But it's hard not to get excited about watching this Albany team for sure, because they have so much exciting young talent, but also the way they're playing as a unit. I mean, that's huge. And the thing to me also is, I mean, Doug Jameson's been very good the last few weeks. He was not very good the first couple of weeks. Like, when they beat Las Vegas early on, he wasn't very good. He was not didn't have a great game. They just managed to overcome it, and thankfully for them, they were playing a Las Vegas team that's also very young in terms of its inception, coming together as a roster, and they're the most recent expansion team, still growing and still finding their legs. Because if they played the way they did against Las Vegas for most of that game, against some of the teams that have been in the playoffs and have more experience, they're going to lose that game. Absolutely. Right. And it'll probably happen. That's the thing. I mean, you do have to remember, people get excited. And I get it. It's hard not to be excited about this Albany team, but it's not going to keep going like this all year. They're not going to keep having everything click all year. Right. They're going to have dry spells like they had against Saskatchewan. And they had a stretch here against Halifax where they had a dry spell offensively. And, the transition stepped up big. with Kastrok in particular, with a couple of transition goals. And, so they're doing a lot of things to let them win those nitty gritty games, which, like you said, that's a great sign, but it's not always going to happen. And, they're going to have to battle to make sure that they earn a playoff spot. But I don't think anybody is going to take them lightly from this point on. That's for sure.
No, and you gotta wonder, how that's gonna go. The dry spells have definitely been a concern for me. You've seen a couple times they've been able to shut them down. Did you pick up something that Halifax was doing maybe, or was it just Hill had kind of was able to step up to shut them down, or what do you attribute that dry spell to in this game?
Honestly, Hill made some big saves, and I think part of it is like Albany's shooting has been really good. Their conversion rate. If you go and look at Cooper Perkins' lax metrics stuff, which I'm still kind of wrapping my head around some of it because there's a lot of info. And I've talked to Cooper about it a fair bit, and I look at that stuff, and I'm still trying to get some of the details of that sorted out and kind of absorbed into my brain. But one of the things that I thought was fairly obvious going into this game is that, like I say, everything's not going to go perfectly all year. They started missing some shots. They started, just hitting Hill sometimes, and Hill made some great saves. You're not going to score on the percentage of shots that Albany was scoring on early in the season for the whole year. And I think the great thing for them about this game against Halifax, though, is that when Halifax made it harder for them, when they had trouble scoring, they did handle it very differently. I wrote in my column last week about how Alex Simmons has been great. I thought he was great. I was surprised he got to number 4 in the draft. I thought he should have gone among the top 2. But he, last week against Saskatchewan, I thought he started forcing things. I thought he was not out of selfishness. I just thought he was thinking, I've been brought in to score goals and make things happen. It's not happening. I need to go and make something happen. I need to go and score. And he was carrying the ball too much and forcing things. And they really got out of the flow of their offense and had to fight to get back into it. Against Halifax, I don't think they did get out of the flow. I don't think they started being too individual. I think they just weren't scoring. And that is a lot easier to take than when you stop following your system. I thought they stayed with their system, and I thought it worked for them. And I thought Simmons, especially for not having scored for so long in the game, when he did score, it was huge for them. But it didn't come from forcing anything. It came from playing within the system that they play, and that to me was huge. And and you have to take that approach because Halifax is so tough that you're not gonna succeed any other way.
No, and like you said, not forcing it though, to even have the patience. So he just missed on pretty much a breakaway fast break situation.
Yeah.
Hill was able to stuff him, and then he comes in and still has the patience to fit that fake in and then finish, like he should. I've been nothing but impressed with all the young guys. Now,
Yeah.
Travis Longboat, we kind of
That's
talked.
the one you're
Oh,
talking about. That's a nice little move that Simmons makes. It's not a huge fake, but he does get the little fake. But he doesn't, I mean, personally, obviously I'm nowhere, I'm light years away from the level of these guys. But when I'm not scoring and I'm not hitting my spots, my reaction is just shoot the ball as hard as I can and hope it goes in. And sometimes it works. And it's not uncommon for players to think like just got to let it rip, just got to let it go. Simmons shows no frustration, shows no lack of self confidence. That's not a hard shot, not a fast, powerful shot he takes. It's an accurate, precisely placed, and kind of deceptive shot in a really big situation.
yeah, and what about Sam Firth? I mean, how he stepped up huge twice.
Oh
Both
man,
of his goals were so big, and to have the
yeah.
poise in that for that game winning, what ended up being the game winning goal, the go ahead goal, the 11th goal.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, yeah. He's another one of these new guys that it's just been, oh my goodness.
Well, Sam Firth, I mean, he's a guy who's been good for a long time, but had to, get his opportunity in the NLL. He's, had a bit of a chance before, but I mean, he is one of the great players in Kufla history. He was just a beast in for Bishops, and he was outstanding in Ontario Junior B, playing up in Nepean. Like he was lights out, and you'd see when I started seeing his highlights come up and then start getting a chance to see more of him as a young player, it was like, holy cow. And you thought at first he was just a shooter Because when I first started seeing him, it seemed like, it was a very good team. He was getting open looks, and he'd bury him. He was a great shooter, but that's what it seemed. But you saw in these games. I mean, the first goal was running around the top of the whole formation onto his offside, a little sidearm shot. And you'd mentioned off air that you're not used to seeing him as a fan of the team shoot from the outside that much, but he showed what he can do on that one, and that was just a great decision to take that one. And I think it's such a nice play. And then the game, what turned out to be the game-winning goal, I just think it's a beautiful play all around. I mean, it just showed how well, again, this young group works as a team, because Firth is on the back door. He starts from the slot, and it kind of looks like he's going to go kind of clear out, and he just reverses course and heads at a pretty sharp angle towards the slot, and they're able to fit that pass through. And it's a great play. It just creates a terrific opportunity for him. And he's such a gifted player that's a high percentage shot for him,
Yeah,
obviously.
absolutely. And you see, like, it's only that half a second, and that's all it took when he changed the angle. Now that I'm watching it after listening to how you described it, yeah, the defenders, you could just see them almost look at each other, is how I've got it paused right now. And they're like, oh, there goes Firth, and it's over.
Yeah,
And actually,
yeah,
Coach Clark had said that, he thought his best game was maybe, I think it was last week when he didn't have a point. And his off
right.
ball movement, you're talking about, he is all over the place. He sets a ton of picks, a lot of those things that don't always get to make the score sheet. But wow, for him to be able to step up like this. And that's the other thing. This offense, if somebody has an off night, they don't have one guy scoring a hat trick a night or a sock trick a night. Like Simmons, you can expect to get 2 or 3 goals, but he's not how some of these teams where you have to have a guy get 5 goals if you want to be in it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, anybody can do it at any night. And I was actually thinking, because I saw Ty Kurtz in this game set a bee sting pick. Just that he went up with his back, so he just set the little bee sting pick, and it really made a big difference in opening up a scoring chance. It may have actually been on the first goal where he ran across the top. And I remember thinking, wow, that's cool, because he hasn't been scoring as much lately. Um, you know, but he's still contributing. And then I look, he scored 5 points every game, like literally every game. Coming up to, he had 20 points in 4 games, and he scored 5 points in every one of them. It was,
Well,
it wasn't like he had 8 points one night and two another. He's been dead consistent. But they are all contributing in that way too. You see Ethan Walker going in and getting loose balls, and a bunch of them, like you see them getting multiple resets, and that's really something against a team like Halifax that is, has got so many good defensive players who are going to get out and get after that ball and get after the guys who are going after it. And they're still coming away with those possessions. Makes a huge difference. There's the one where, obviously Albany comes up with a few possessions in a row, and then they give it away on on an illegal pick. It was a pretty zesty pick. So,
it was,
that's
but
not ideal.
that's one of the things that I'm a huge fan of. I mean, Nardella, this team, they seem to perform when they need to. They got all those resets, and that's in the final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. They've got the 1 goal lead. They're
Yeah.
trying to just hold on to it. Nardella
Yeah.
seems to win the faceoffs. He needs to win because, like, when you look at the percentage, it showed Withers won, a majority of the faceoffs. But really, Nardella with that goal and then being able to win the faceoffs he needed to, like after they scored immediately, most of the time he was able to get the face off, control it a little bit. And you saw when he didn't, Halifax answered quick.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Nardella won 9 faceoffs out of the 26 he took, so less than just over a third. So not a high percentage. Obviously, Jake Withers, you're generally not going to win a ton of faceoffs against Jake Withers. But the nice thing with Nardella is that he's similar to Withers in that he can play really good defense. I mean, Jake Withers is, to my mind, there's no question Jake Withers is the best faceoff player, or the best player who takes almost all of his team's faceoffs and is also a great defensive player. Like, there's other guys. Like, I mean, Mike Messenger's a great player, and he takes faceoffs, but he's not a faceoff guy. Withers is probably the best faceoff player, just faceoffs alone, in the sport. And there's no question when you throw in the defensive side of things, that he's the best at the position. But Nardella is up in that company. He's definitely among those top few, like, being able to do both. And that makes a big difference. And then, once in a while, you pull it out like he does, pull that face off out right after the Kastrok goal and race in and score. That obviously helps as well.
Yeah, and that being said, I mean, like you're talking about his defense, I noticed this year he really has stepped up a lot, and I know you like that clip of him playing without a stick. I mean, to
Oh,
it's that's so hard to do, but his body position on that, and he's playing on Cody Jamieson.
yeah. 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 And he does a really good job, and he's very smart. He knows he can't go get the stick. There's no way he's close enough to get it. So he just D's up. And one of my favorite defensive shifts I ever saw by a player without a stick was in an OLA Junior A, Ontario Junior A final between Orangeville and Whitby. And Jason Noble lost his stick, and he was playing. I can't remember who he had to cover. It wasn't. I don't think it was Mark Matthews, but it was like somebody, one of Whitby's really, really good players that he's out covering. And you would not know he didn't have a stick. He was so good. Like, Jason Noble was a brilliant defender. In junior, he was really obviously a great NLL defender. He was unbelievable in junior. And seeing Joe Nardella, who's now a box guy, but definitely wasn't growing up, play so solidly without the stick on, Cody Jamieson, one of the best players in the history of the game, is pretty impressive, and shows you, like you said, how far he's come as a defensive guy.
Yeah, and it's actually funny. So he's a 315 guy. He's from the area right outside of Utica.
Okay,
I
I
found that
didn't know
out
what
when
you
I
meant when you said that, but
Yeah,
three
no,
one five.
yeah, and I found that out when I talked to him last year. Actually, not even when I talked to him,
Okay.
I talked to somebody afterwards, and they were like, "Yeah, no, we played against him in high school." I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
all right,
yeah,
yeah, yeah." Banesh, the patience he has out front. I mean, has he
yeah.
always been this good? I mean, I've only known him
Oh
from
yeah.
since the Firewolves have been in town, and he is. For a big guy, he has such soft hands. And what seems to be the biggest thing with him is the vision. He always seems to get himself into open places.
Ryan Benesh has always been that guy, honestly, from when he came into the league. I mean, he's grown and he's evolved as a great player will, but he's never. I mean, he's not the most physical guy. He's not the fastest guy, but that sense of going into the spaces, like when he played in Buffalo, he was unbelievable. He'd been great before that. He'd had great stretches in Edmonton, and he's good in Colorado. Like he's done good things all over the place. He was in Minnesota for quite a while, right? I remember when he went to Buffalo, and I got to see him in person more, and that's when you can really appreciate how he finds those little gaps. He finds little spaces, and doesn't need a ton of time to shoot, but he has absolutely no fear because he's not. I mean, he's not a bruising physical player. That's not his style. But he will just get where he needs to be. And this one goal that we're talking about, the Halifax fifth goal that I want to talk about is, Austin Shanks comes around the top of the formation and just tosses the ball over to Cody Jamieson. Pretty nice pass. And Jamieson, one touch to Banesh. The timing of this is spectacular because it looks so simple. It looks so easy the way they do this. You're like, well, Shanks throws it over, Jameson just touches it to him. But watch Banesh as he gets open for this play. I mean, it's a matter of going in. He's setting a hard pick, and then doesn't like race in to the top of the crease. He just kind of steps in to be there at the time that the pass can be available. And that's him and Cody Jamieson. And Austin Shanks is a very good player too, not quite as experienced as the others, but that's just some guys who have been playing this game for a long time and have an immaculate sense of timing. Because Cody Jamieson, makes that pass in his sleep, but that's a really hard pass to get it that quickly and change the direction. Just put it in the perfect spot to be aware as he's taking that pass from Shanks through traffic of what Banesh is doing and where he's going to be. And that's what makes it so easy because that's an easy goal for Ryan Banesh. But everything leading up to him being that open is not easy. You know what I mean?
It's less than a second from the time it leaves Austin Shanks' stick and is in Benesh's stick and in the back of the net. It's
Yeah.
1.2 or something like that. But it's less
Yeah.
than a second.
Unbelievable,
Cody
right?
Jamieson, that's so fast. Yeah, I'll slow it down when I edit this together so you can see it. But
Perfect.
wow, yeah, that is You don't even. I was sitting right there, and I did not think Banesh got the ball at first. I thought it got knocked down.
Right,
I thought it
right.
bounced whoever Cody was trying to pass it to. I thought the defender there knocked it down, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh no, Banesh has that, and it's already in the
Yeah,
back of the net.
yeah, yeah. You didn't have time to think that, right?
No.
You don't have time for that thought
Just
process.
uh
It's remarkable, and they do things like that. And, and that's we've talked quite a bit about Albany because they're the big story. They're the exciting story this year, and getting 5 wins. But boy, some of the things Halifax does. I mean, you see things that Graham Hossick does, but Jameson and Banesh on that end. Clark Peterson is fantastic. Like I think last year was his. People are talking about this as his breakout year. I think last year was his breakout year where he became one of the elite players in the league. A two-way game, like you see him. Some of the plays I love from him is hustling back to break up transition chances, where he'll just track somebody down because he sees it happening and he's gone like a shot, and he's so fast. So there's a lot of cool stuff. I want to make sure we got some Halifax tidbits as well. It can't be just an all Albany thing.
no, actually Halifax is one of my favorite teams to watch because like you said, they
Yeah.
play with such a passion. The way that team operates, and honestly, I this is the first year in 2 years that Halifax has not had a great start. So I'm hoping that this bodes well for them going down the stretch because the last 2 years they've come out pretty good and then kind of petered off towards the end. What I more wonder is with the age of their team and how well they've got a lot of young pieces, and you don't have to worry about some of these guys ever breaking down. It seems like when you're
Yeah.
talking about the cyborg that is Graham Hossick, it, he has an infinite amount of energy. But actually, there's one play where you see Hasek, he is just so physically imposing. It doesn't look like he's doing anything, but he's just pushing guys out of the way.
Yeah, and not just one guy. You point out, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's he just dominates people, and and it is they are a physical team. They play with that passion, and that's their strength and their weakness in a way, right? I mean, having to control that. I mean, I think the announcers were talking about how, like Kersey had said, they were trying to tell Tyson Bell, like, hey, you got to just make sure you're not taking too many penalties because he plays on the edge. Honestly, he plays over the edge a lot, and seems to get away with things. I mean, there's one play he comes in and I see him coming in. I'm like, oh, he's just going to slash this guy and pulls up the stick, whack. There's no call, and I don't know why because I mean he's a great player, but his game is based on being really unpleasant to play against. There's the other one where he just grabs Colton Watkinson in a headlock and drags him down to the floor in a pretty good little MMA move, and no call. Now, in that case, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Colton Watkinson did something first that made him very upset. I, I, I'm never surprised when that's the case. Like it's a physical game. All these guys, none of these guys are angels. But I mean, that to me is a pretty clear penalty that should probably be called, especially given some of the other calls that were made. I mean, you see like a Mike Byrne boarding penalty, like not a whole lot of contact. Like, there's some plays. It's interesting because the funny thing you talk about the power play hasn't been helping Albany, and I know this is a huge divergence from where we just were, but I think of the play where Nathan Grennan, who again deserves just about every penalty he ever gets, because I think he's another guy who plays with an edge, has to do that, but needs to learn when to draw the line, when to kind of back off a little bit at times, because it's not always the right situation. But he gets taken down. Somebody's right on top of him, and Brennan's just kind of defending himself, and Grennan gets a penalty, along with the Halifax player that was Max Wilson, who'd buried him. And I'm like, where does his penalty come from? And Albany, they've had like in their game against Las Vegas, another really chippy team. They got a lot of power plays, didn't make use of them. It was what 0 for 9 on the power play, I believe, in that game. But they actually had a pretty just case to argue that they should have got more calls. And the one where they got the two minors in Las Vegas that both should have pretty clearly been majors, I thought at the time. I mean, Albany is not, they're not getting here with, assistance from the officials or anything. They're not getting big, lots of breaks or chances. They're earning what they're doing. Um, and boy, Halifax makes you earn whatever you get against them.
Kept hearing the announcers talking about how big Halifax's defense is, and it's not something you
Yeah.
really think about because they're very athletic. They're not just like a big
Mhm.
group of monsters that doesn't run. But when you actually are
Right.
watching it, you're like, oh my goodness, almost every one of their guys is bigger than
Yeah.
the guys that they're playing against. It's just not something that I had really picked
Yeah.
up on, and I think a lot of it's because of their athletic ability.
Mhm. Yeah, they do have that athleticism, and it makes it so hard when a guy can get to you quickly and carry a huge load when he throws a hit. That's a combination that makes you keep your head up and makes you hear feet. You hear the footsteps when they're coming when you're getting hit the way you are. And then it's not just on D, right? I mean, they've got Dawson Feed up front, who to me, I mean, reminds me of like a bigger Dane Dobie, the way he'll just go through you or around you or whatever. There's the one play where he uses the left arm to just kind of ward off, but not too much. There's no call and you don't see warding off called a lot. You do see it sometimes, like a Callum Crawford, who's a master of warding off, will sometimes get called because there are times he'll just like shove a guy right out of the way. Speed kind of gets his arm wrapped around, but he doesn't push the guy back. He just kind of opens his lane and heads to the net and scores a beautiful goal. And should it have been called warding? I don't think so. I think it was actually I like that call. Just a really impressive play. Now I think the defender needed to get drop stepped and he needed to be in better position. It wasn't a great defensive play. There was a few breakdowns here and there, obviously, but boy, speed can make you pay if you don't cover him well and close.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that was actually though I think a lot of it because it was really one motion. You don't see him, reach for the defender and then
Yes.
push off him. I think that is a lot of it. Like you said, he just smoothly kind of gets that arm up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
hand comes right
Yeah.
back down to the stick all in one motion. So
Yeah.
that would probably be, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think okay.
That was a nice goal.
Yeah.
Kept his toes outside of the crease for a big man to see him go flying across. That is, I love watching the big guys dive because they.
Athletic control for a big fella. It's like when Herschel Walker went and danced with the Dallas Ballet, and you're like, "What's this gonna be like?" And yeah, he was okay.
Yeah.
I love this play. Albany's offense has gotten so much credit this year, and they deserve it. They've been fantastic. I love this play by Mike Byrne, where he picks up this rebound off the shot, bounces around, he picks up, and there's so much pressure on him as Randy Stotts comes to forecheck him, is right on top of him, bangs him into the boards. Austin Shanks comes over, all kinds of pressure there as well. And I love that Byrne doesn't panic. He realizes there's these two guys on me, and you can see he has a quick look up the floor and realizes there's space. There's nobody else in a white jersey coming in and filling in that space because there's the two, Shanks and Stotts already up. It's mostly black jerseys, and he just kind of dumps the ball out there where it can be picked up by his teammate. That lets Albany with that 1-goal lead and just a minute 3 to play as it's picked up. So a minute 5 or so as he throws this pass, pick it up, go over center, and kill 30 seconds. Have the chance to kill the shot clock, which is huge. And I love how calm and poised all of these guys are. Mike Burns, a relative veteran, but you've got guys like we're going to see some things from in here from some of the other players that I think are just really good signs that this defense is ready to take their share of the load, even more so maybe than they've been doing already.
Absolutely. And that being said, so he throws it up and he gets it to Kaschuk, and we've talked about it before. I mean, he is just so smart in transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he just steps across center, heads over towards the bench. Obviously, in a lot of cases, you're heading away from the bench, but he saw, that they've got the change coming. He's got clear space. He's not going to get trapped if he goes over towards the bench because there's room for him, and he can make a pass to a teammate, and it's huge. And then Tchaikovsky follows that up in the final clip we got by picking off this pass. And here's another, just such a headsy play. Now, this is one of your alternate captains. This is a veteran player in Nick Tchaikovsky, but it can be so enticing. You've seen guys get drawn, get sucked in by that open net and just think, I've just got to get the shot off. I've got to get the shot off. And he makes very sure he's not going to, because the defender, the player running back to defend the net is in pretty good position to possibly block it or at least be prepared to try something. And Tchaikovsky managed to get him twisted around. There's very little risk when he puts that ball in of missing because there's still enough time that there could have been a bit of an issue. So I think those two plays and some of the cast chalk plays that we've talked about, with him pulling out just heads up plays by young players or burgeoning veterans that are really critical to why Albany is such a competitive team, why they're 5-0 right now. And sure, the scoring is great. And Simmons, Kirks, Palace, the whole gang up front, Walker, they've been fantastic. But the defense is doing a huge share of the lifting. And that's big because they've given up 10 goals exactly in 4 of their 5 games. I talked about this on IL Indoor this week, that 10 goals a game that you allow, you should be winning most of those games, and they've won all 4 of those. When they gave up 13, they had to go a little further offensively to get the win as well.
Yeah, no, and thankfully they have been able to. I know a lot of people who didn't really know a lot of these young men coming in and didn't know who
Mm-hmm.
Simmons was, and they were really unsure when they were getting rid of all these big names. The last 2 years they've gotten rid of a lot of big names, and then last year Connor Kelly, everybody knew him as the guy that was scoring for the Firewolves. So I know so many of the guys that were local. And to see what they've done so far, the poise of this team for how young they are is what really impresses me. Probably more than anything with this team is just in these
Mm-hmm.
tight games against a super veteran team like Halifax, they really keep it together. And like you said, when you look at Simmons, you can't tell if he scored or if he just got beat out of play. He's very even keel.
Yeah, we were talking before we started recording that Alex Simmons scores, and you wouldn't really know that whether he's been stoned on the play or if he scored. I was calling him the anti Austin Stotts, because Austin Stotts, I don't know if I know anybody who enjoys doing something more than Austin Stotts enjoys scoring. I love that. I love the passion and excitement that Austin Stotts shares, but you got to respect Alex Simmons and his approach as well. And it's a pretty matter of fact or take it in stride kind of club. They're not getting too high and too low for such a young, the youngest roster in the league.
So
Perfect.
thank you so much for joining us this week, Stamp. And hopefully we can do this every week where we kind of pick a game. And what a great game this ended up. Every week there's
Yeah,
been these games.
yeah,
It's been crazy.
yeah, yeah. You just want to make sure that the game, you hope that the game you pick, because we picked this one, like we thought this was going to be exciting and looked like a really, really interesting game, and it worked out. But I mean, there's multiple games. It's hard when there's 3 games at the same time, and you can't see all of them happening. So it's like the other games, there was some really interesting stuff in Georgia and Baylor City and the Buffalo, Colorado, and then the Sunday game was great, but it was a standalone. We got that, but yeah, no, it's fun. I'm down to do some more of these, and yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get more efficient. Again, I ramble a bit. So you feel free to chop me down a little because I will get going and I get excited and I'll just keep going. Well, and obviously I veer off into tangents too.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's awesome. Thanks a lot. And really appreciate you taking the time.
You betcha.